Hello, and welcome to my video on my top 5 survivor tips. Tip number 1. Use your camera to your advantage. As a survivor, you have the advantage of having a third-person camera. Because of this, you can look around corners and objects without actually moving into view. This can help you move around a searching killer so he does not see you. This also allows you to keep an eye on the killer from a distance. If you can see that the killer is chasing someone, then you know you are 100% safe and can heal or do a generator without fear of getting caught. The killer can only do one thing at a time, after all. A lot of the time you can see the killer, but they won't see you, which greatly helps with staying stealthy and unseen. More importantly, you can use your camera to look behind you mid-chase. Make sure to watch which direction the killer is going, because then you can go the opposite direction, like I do here, and lose the killer as a result. A lot of killers out there will also tunnel survivors, either because they are injured or dead hook, and you are not. So if they have tunnel vision like this huntress right here, then you can safely just walk away and do a generator. Again, the most useful function of the camera is watching a killer with it. As you see here, the killer tries to predict me by vaulting through the window, but I use my camera to look around the corner first and go the opposite direction.
Wow, the window jukes.
Many killers also try to mind game survivors, but if you use your camera, this makes it incredibly hard for killers to do. For example, this right here tries to mind game me, but I see what he does and react accordingly. He tries so hard to mind game me that he loses me. And here is another example of how essential using your camera is. This Myers tries to mind game me here by switching directions constantly, but every time he changes direction, I change direction, and so I manage to escape the tier 3 Myers. There are so many survivors that don't even look behind them when they're new, and it really shows, especially to the killer. Survivors throw pallets and jump windows without even checking if the killer is chasing them. The best way to show this is through some killer footage, so let's see it. Here I predict the Jake jumping through the window, so instead of chasing him through the window, I cut him off. If he was watching me with his camera, he would have known I was coming this way and jumped back through the window. Now here, if Dwight was looking behind him, he would have seen me easily cut him and not have gotten hit by my chainsaw. Here, Meg messes up. She throws the pallet, even though I just hit her, which wastes her speed boost, and then comes right back to me, even though I stopped to break the pallet. And then one final example here, Dwight is not looking behind him, and as a result, gets hit by my chainsaw again. All of these deadly mistakes could have been avoided if these survivors used their camera to their advantage. When you are being chased, you need to know where the killer is in relation to you. Now, the most difficult thing about this, though, is running into objects while looking backwards. Just practice and you'll eventually be able to maneuver your camera accordingly. It isn't always necessary. Like if you're in open space with nowhere to hide, you know the killer is just going to chase you straight. But once you get into jungle gyms and objects that block line of sight, experienced killers will try to predict and mind game you. Like this nurse does here, predicting I'll run off the balcony and away. But instead, I stay on the balcony and she loses me.
Get mind game, nurse.
Tip number 2. Learn the maps. Map awareness can mean the difference between life and death. Knowing where to run when you are seen is crucial. There are a lot of maps that have really good areas to get away from the killer. And some killers will even refuse to chase survivors in these areas. So here's an example. I am on Fractured Cowshed. I know behind me is a pallet loop, and also the barn is really close by. So I have an escape plan for if the killer comes, which he does, and I immediately run over to this pallet loop here. My plan is to keep the killer around here for a while, and then once I waste the pallet, I will run to the barn to continue wasting the killer's time. I get greedy for the pallet stun and accidentally get hit, but then I run straight for the barn. And I make sure that the killer is following me using my camera. Now, the barn is a really good juking spot for survivors, and the killer knows this. So after I loop him one time, he gives up on me and leaves to find a survivor who isn't at the barn. Now, the maps in DBD are randomized, so they aren't exactly the same every single time. But these randomizations apply to things like jungle gyms, pallets, obstacles like trash, rocks, barrels, trees, generator locations, and window locations, and chests. Things like the size and layout of the map remain the same every single time. And a lot of the maps have a defining feature of them that is always there 100% of the time. For example, the barn on the cowshed. It will always be on that map. So the way this game randomizes maps is it has a bunch of pre-built squares. And let's say it needs 8 blocks to create this map, but it has 24 blocks to choose from. So it will randomly choose 8 of those 24 blocks and click them all together to create this randomly generated map. So for example, on the Rotten Silo map, the silo itself only has 2 different variations. One variation being this window is closed and that window opened, and the other being this window is closed and that one open. Additionally, the pallets around the silo are randomized, but their locations will always be the same if they spawn. So I'm going to give you a tour of the silo. So right in the front here, there will be a pallet or no pallet. On the right here, this pallet could spawn potentially. Then if we go over to the other side of the silo past this window, there's this area with a rock, and 2 pallets can potentially spawn here on the left or right side of the rock. They didn't spawn in this variation though, but it randomly generates. So there is 4 possible locations for pallets to spawn around the silo, but the game will only choose 2 places to spawn the pallets in. I'm going to show you how a jungle gym can vary. So over here we have a common type of jungle gym. In front of me here we see a pallet, but that pallet will not always be there. So sometimes you'll have 2 pallets in this loop, sometimes 1, sometimes 0. Then over on the left here, this is where the second pallet can spawn, but right here it's not. In front of me there's a window, but sometimes there's no window there. And then over here, sometimes it's a window instead of an open space. So those are just a few examples of how this type of jungle gym can be varied. Map awareness can help you find generators as well, because after playing on the map several times, you get an idea of where they typically spawn. And on some maps like Gas Heaven, there will be an area where the generator will always spawn, such as inside the gas shop. So tip number 3, always have an escape plan and know what's around you. So a lot of times when I start off a game, instead of getting on a generator right away, I look around the map to see what kind of variation I got, where the pallets are, where the windows are, what's up, what's not up. And this is really important because pallets and windows are your best tools at getting away from the killer. And jungle gyms, you can lose killers in them. So it's really good to be aware of where these things are. And in addition to knowing where they are, you also have to know whether the pallets are broken or not. Because as the game goes on, more and more pallets are likely to be unavailable as survivors use them to get away from the killer. Now, when I get my first generator, I plan out my escape route. So, right here in this clip, I'm in the garage, and I know I can go to the back window, or I can run to the forward window, and I also know there's a pallet behind me. So I have a route planned out from whichever direction the killer will come at me. Also remember to keep turning your camera around to look out for the killer. Now, a lot of times there will be another survivor with you when you're working on a generator or whenever you're in an area. And here's what I have to say. Always run in the opposite direction of the other survivor, and here's why. If you guys both run the same direction, it is really easy for the killer to catch both of you. Because if the killer is only one person, he can only go one direction. So if you both go the same direction, it makes his job a lot easier. Like these two Claudettes here, they both ran for the same double window to escape the basement. Instead, the healthy Claudette should have tried to run a separate direction than the injured Claudette, so that I would have to choose. As killer, I've seen survivors try to go through the same windows, over the same pallets, and all it does is you body block the survivor behind you and they get hit as a result. So really try to not run the same direction as another survivor. Another thing you should not do is camp pallets around a survivor being chased, because here's the thing. If a survivor tries to throw a pallet, like run through and throw it down, but another survivor is blocking the way, instead of running through the pallet, the survivor's just going to throw it straight down and then get hit by the killer. And let me tell you, that is not a good feeling when you get downed by the killer because a survivor was standing in front of the pallet that you were going to use to escape. Now, there are some exceptions with running the same direction as another survivor, and this is if a survivor is injured and you're not, and you want to help that survivor reach the exit gate or lose sight of the killer, you can try and run behind that survivor so that the killer is forced to hit you first before he can hit the injured survivor he is chasing.
Hey, you made it out.
If you do happen to run the same way as another survivor, remember to always let the survivor behind you throw the pallet, because they do not want to get hit by the killer just as much as you do. And if you throw the pallet first, you basically block that survivor's path, and then the killer gets a free hit on them 90% of the time. So do not ever throw a pallet on top of another survivor. Now, another part of always having an escape plan and knowing your surroundings is being cautious of which generators you work on, because there are some generators that spawn in open areas where, unless you have sprint burst, you won't be able to get to a jungle gym or pallet or window until the killer has gotten a hit on you. So be very cautious about which generators you decide to work on. Tip number 4, do not try to unhook yourself or kill yourself on the hook. So when you're placed on the hook, you see this attempt escape bar that you can do, and you should not do this. Being a new survivor, you might think it's a good idea, but I am telling you, it is not. You only have 3 tries to attempt escaping a hook. Every time you try to escape the hook, it takes off a large portion of your health bar. So if you do this, you're just killing yourself faster, because when you go into the struggle state, which is when you have to press space bar, that means the next time you go on the hook, you're going to die. Attempt escape is meant to be a last-ditch effort to get off the hook if everyone on your team is down or dead. But if you have people that are still walking and alive, do not attempt to escape from the hook. Just be patient and wait for the save. You have a ton of time before your health bar gets to half health, and then from half health to 0. So do not panic because nobody's going for you right away. They just want to make sure that the killer is not in the area and that they save you safely instead of saving you in an unsafe position. By trying to unhook yourself, all you are doing is hurting your team, because that puts you in the struggle state, which means you're closer to death, and it's in the killer's advantage. And if you kill yourself on the hook, well, now your team is at a huge disadvantage because they're down an entire team member. So I highly encourage you, just stay on the hook and keep pressing that space bar when you're in the struggle state. There have been so many times that I have gone to go save somebody, and right before I save them, they either die or they die when I'm on the way to save them. And I really don't understand that since I was right there. But please, be a team player and stay alive. If you see the killer is camping, this might make you think you should just kill yourself, but do not think this. If a killer is camping, he is wasting so much time standing at that hook. So if you just stay there on the hook for your entire first stage and second stage, that will give your team enough time to do 3 to 4 generators, possibly even powering the exit gates.
No, you're not gonna.
And so by killing yourself, all you do is allow the killer to go find another survivor and camp them and secure his pip.
I die so everyone
You
else
will
can
not
live. I
pip
told
if
you
the
I'm that
killer
kind of
camps you.
survivor.
But think about it this way. The killer won't pip either, and all 3 other survivors are going to get out of the match and probably pip. So it's a huge advantage to your team to be a team player and just stay on the hook, wasting the killer's time. Now the final tip, number 5. Do not be scared. This is a scary game, but you have to learn how to not be so fearful of the killer just because you hear a little heartbeat. You have to get things done in order to survive the game, and if you are in the closet all game, nothing will be done and you're going to die. So you have to not be so scared of the killer that you don't do anything. Don't be the survivor that hides in the locker all game or crouch walks along the edge of the map. If you see the killer coming at you in an open area, don't crouch, run. They have eyes, they'll see you. Don't be scared to do generators and go for saves. I see so many new survivors not go for saves and the killer isn't even camping. This game requires you to do your part, and if you don't work as a team player, no one will win but the killer. So if you do the generators and go for saves, then you will most likely get your pip and succeed in the game, even if you die at the end. There is only 1 killer and 4 survivors. The killer can only chase 1 person at a time, so there is no reason to not do a generator if you aren't being chased. The time that it is the safest in the game is when the killer picks up the survivor they downed, because while the killer has that survivor on their shoulder and is taking them to the hook, they cannot harm you at all. So just keep working on the generators because the killer is no threat to you in that moment. You can also assume that once a survivor has been injured that the killer is chasing them. And so you also know you are safe because the killer is too busy trying to catch that injured survivor and not patrolling the gens looking for you. There are also a lot of killers that will tunnel vision and not see you because they're focusing on what they see right in front of them. So this is another good example of keeping your cool, just doing your generator and not being scared of the killer and wasting valuable time. And one final thing, be friendly. Talk to other survivors in your lobbies. Ask questions if you're a new player. I've had a lot of good lobby chats, and then I've had ones where I say hi, and it's dead silence. If you've had a fun game with someone, send them a friend request. Playing and learning with other new players can help you become a better player yourself, and making friends with more experienced players will help you learn how to be better at the game as well. It's this sharing of knowledge that will make you a lot better at playing the game. Having even one friend can greatly help your chances in a game, since you know for sure that someone has your back, and you two can learn together and have fun. I didn't make any friends when I was new to the game, In fact, I didn't get any other friends that played the game until I was consistently hitting rank 1. And one person, after a game, asked if I wanted to team up. So I said, sure, why not? And since then, I've actually met a lot of really cool other survivors in games, and playing with these other survivors has taught me a lot about the game and made me a better survivor as well. So those are my 5 tips for you. I hope they have helped you understand the game better and will help you in the future throughout your matches in the fog. So thank you very much for watching, and as always, good luck out there in the fog.